Hey folks, it's Gregg Bendian here for the podcast, ProgCast if you will, and I am just so pleased to have one of my favorite people today, one of my favorite musicians, just one of the best guys that I know in all of music. I know him as Bill Harkleroad, and I think many of you know him as Zoot Horn Rollo. So today we're going to be chatting about a bunch of different things. We go back a little bit ways in terms of when we worked together and how we've known each other, I think, since about the late 90s. We're going to talk about some of Bill's work with, of course, Captain Beefheart, but also what he did after that. And we're going to even talk a little bit about our work together on Bill's first solo recording from 2001 called We Saw Bozo Under the Sea. Bill, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Greg. I got to remember not to talk over you there. Thank you, and wow, so you're so nice. I feel the same way. I'll just make it short. You said everything. I feel the same way, Greg.
Well, we've always had a very mutual kind of situation going.
Yep,
and,
for sure.
Very easy to talk to you, and love picking your brains about all the history that you've been involved in, and really just your whole, I'd say, attitude about music, which I'd say is right in the happy zone for me in terms of tradition, awareness of the tradition, moving the tradition forward into another area with our own sort of creative impulses.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to go back and ask you some things I've really never had the chance to ask you, but as a teenager, when did you really know that you were going to be doing music? Did you know you wanted to play guitar? Did you have inspiration from music you were listening to? Was there anything in particular that kind of launched you into this?
I think the earliest experiences were watching my mother's feet go on the pedals, right, on a piano, 4 years old or whatever, and just laying on the floor watching that and hearing that affected me, you know, not so much consciously, but obviously in that 0 to 5 time. If you're getting input, it's huge. You know, accordion lessons when I was 5 or 6, a couple of mafia guys come to the door, and I was totally freaked out, man. I mean, it was like, you're going to take some lessons. Hey, you're going to take some lessons. Yeah, oh yeah, my mother says, yeah, you're going to take some lessons. And I'm hiding like this going, oh shit. So that kind of set the tone early that through her I was going to do music. But to get to guitar, friends of mine played, and so I was 12 when I started playing a couple of chords. My sister had a baritone ukulele, which is actually tuned like the top 4 strings of guitar. So I played that, and I'd play 2 major chords back and forth, Mixolydian, right, back and forth, and sit on the street thinking I was cool. And then I borrowed a guitar from a friend of mine when I was 13, and I'm in a band instantly playing surf music and ventures music and things like that. At that time, I think it was more just like early teens, you know, pimples and boners. You know, it's just like what you're going through. And it was a team thing, and it was an identity separate from being a baseball player or sports. That was my dad's view of how he was seeing me. So it was mom and dad with those opposite views. By the time I was 15, I think it was pretty solid that, you know, this is, you know, I couldn't imagine doing anything else, you know, by that time, you know.
What were you listening to?
I would say very pedestrian classical through my mother. My dad had played horn as a kid, but played Artie Shaw stuff, things like that. So there was some big band things that would be playing on those big stereos, those huge things. And what I listened to was at first just what was ever on the radio, and I never will forget Fingertips by Stevie Wonder. Is that like 62? Something like that?
Mid-60s?
Because he was 12 when
he
did it, I think. You know, so, and I had this little transistor radio. That was a new thing, and it was this Sputnik thing with you change the channels by pulling this lever up and down. And there was a local station, and I'd listen to that, and then ran into, what's the guy's name? Not Howlin' Wolf, Wolfman Jack. And you could hear that stuff through FM stations. And all of that kind of happened at the same time. And by the time I was 14, 15, Beefheart was out, and they were the hot local band. So it was big change from that early surf music and instrumental music, learning just a few chords, and my first paycheck of $7.50, which was like, are you kidding me? This is cool. And so that was the early thing. And then it started shifting really quickly into blues things, but then I started listening to, and I fell in love with Gabor Szabo, of all things. It was just, I think I heard Chico Hamilton. I just heard certain things, and so I gravitated them really quick because they were simple enough jazz things. They weren't moving through changes. It wasn't bebop. It was simpler for me to hear, more modal and things, or simple tunes. And it just started resonating with me. So that started the progression of a friend of mine at school. This is kind of just before the Watts riots, a black person, good friend of mine, handed me a Cannonball Adderley album. Okay. And that kind of started that.
Wow. So you just said Beefheart and the Magic Band, or was it just Beefheart was a local band at that point?
Oh yeah. I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. I think 64. So yeah, I was a freshman, the end of freshman, beginning of sophomore year in high school, around then. And then by the time I was a junior, I started going to jam sessions with them. And that's probably why I ended up in the band, because Mark and I were in the same band at the time, not Jeff or John, but we all kind of small town. Everybody knows everybody. And so through those jam sessions, I remember Don going, I felt pretty comfortable in my chops playing with the guitar players that were with them at the time. I was going, I know what they're playing, so I felt comfortable enough, because I was always a pretty shy person, still am, believe it or not.
No, I know that you definitely keep to yourself, and that's comfortable. So who else was on these jams then, if not the other guys from the Magic Band?
It was other guys from Magic Band. There was a guy named Ernie, and I can't remember his name, and he was their age. I mean, when you're that young, 6, 8 years, I think Don was 8 years older than me. Some of the other guys they were all right around there. And Ernie was the leader of the band, the singer of the band I was in with Mark. And we're 15, and these guys are in their mid-20s or whatever, early 20s. And so there was that dynamic of that. But him and Mark, P.G. Blakely, who played in the Beefheart band, he was our drummer at the time, but he ended up in Beefheart for a while. Actually, I think might have been in the very original band, and then recycled through a period. So I was kind of aware of all the players that went through that band. So it was pretty much just our band and their band, and the pretty girls, we hoped.
Were there any?
I don't know. I said that, and that was the side thing, but I was so focused on, God, this is Beefheart, man. I got to show off. I got to play every note I know.
Yeah. So how did the thing form? I mean, how did you sort of go from jamming to being in Captain Beefheart's band?
I think it was because John went first, Jeff Cotton went second, I was third than Mark, and related to age, I think, was John is a year older, but I was in a Timothy Leary LSD cult, living in Lake Tahoe. And that's the only period in my life, besides recently, where I didn't play for about 6 months. And I kind of knew I was going to junior college to get a deferment from going to Vietnam, which was very much on my mind. And then I was in a band, and we were going to go up to Lake Tahoe, and this is light show time and all that. And we're playing Buffalo, Springfield songs, writing our own tunes, Jimi Hendrix, things like that, so doing covers, but writing our own tunes too at the same time. And then I just had this feeling that it was going to happen. And I got the call word of mouth from one of the guys who went back down to the valley from Tahoe and said something. And I went back down there, and very quickly, actually we moved down there to be part of that cult and build a store to sell hippie stuff, and my background. And then I got the call and met Jerry Hanley, the bass player of the original band, and rode down and did the tryout thing. But I
Where
kind of
was
had that feeling. Huh?
Where was that?
That was in the Woodland Hills house. That was in the Trout Mask house, June 1968.
So they already had the house.
Yep. I don't know how long. I think they had recently moved there. They had lived on the street. That was on Ensenada Drive with Golondrina. I can't remember all that. Can't believe I remember those names. Jesus. Hooray. But yeah, they were there, I think, for maybe less than a year in that house when I got there. And then Mark was, I don't know, 9 months later, something like that. I can't remember exactly, Mark.
I think everyone's fascinated by the fact that at a certain point, Beefheart starts giving you guys names. Do you remember that process? Do you remember when, I'm now known as Zoot Horn Rollo? Like, what is that about?
I think there could be a few things. And John French said he was going to be Zoot Horn Rollo because the name existed before I got there. And actually, I think Alex St. Clair, which I knew as Alex Snoffer was his original name, had come up with that name, probably smoking pot, and just said something funny and everybody started laughing. By the time I got in the band was straight. But I think that was, so the idea was around. Now, the way I think of it is that Don was stuck. I got to be Captain Beefheart for the rest of my life. Okay, so let's pass that around. And with his creativity for those names, right? And so I think the name existed. I'm pretty sure it did. I'm just going from what John said. Those names existed. And as soon as I got there, and maybe even before Mark, it was like, boom, we are these people. Drumbo, Antenna Jimmy Siemens, and Zoot Horn Rollo, and then Mark became Rockette Morton. That really happened kind of quick, but I think it was, I think really what it was about is that, okay, if I'm going to be Beefheart, you guys don't get to be John, Bill, and, Mark, Jeff, I'm thinking that.
Yeah. No, I know it's a long time ago, and time is rough on these things, but
well, yeah, living with the name has been interesting and not interesting both ways.
How so?
At first I really liked it. Second, coming out of there, I was just like, I wanted to be rid of all of it. And then I thought, okay, wait a minute. I'm stupid if I abandon that name. That's how people know me. I said, that's really stupid. And I did like the idea of running into a phone booth and turning into Superman and running out. Phone booth. That's how old I am. Phone booths were around. And so it was a love-hate relationship with the idea. I mean, now with my old friends, and they go, what? And I go, okay, I don't care. I really don't care anymore. I don't associate myself with Bill or Zoot. It's just, those are just tags out there. But it was like, I don't want to be that anymore. Oh, I kind of have to be. Actually, it's kind of cool. No, it's not. Who knows?
But it ends up giving you a very special place in music history when Beefheart asks you to play that long lunar note.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's fun for me when I'm reading these Rolling Stone articles, great guitar moments, and they say that, number 38 is Beefheart on Big Eyed Beans,
Yeah, it's, even the David Fricke thing of me being listed as number 62. I've said it, and I would say it to David Fricke. I'm not a fan of the list, and I think it should have been rock or pop world culture guitar players or old blues players. There was 2 or 3 jazz players on the list, I think. And so the list is really ridiculous. But for me, I took it as a compliment because although almost everybody in there that was still alive was out there gigging, promoting themselves. I had just hid from music and went, I'm done. I got to figure out who I am. I moved to the forest in Oregon and played classic guitar for 6-7 years, 8 hours a day. That's just what I did, just to get completely wipe that clean. So for me to end up on that list was a real compliment because I wasn't out there, you know what I mean? It was just like, cool. This is good for me. It's a good thing, So I'm happy about that. I feel fortunate, but at the same time, it's a highly suspect list.
I certainly wouldn't argue. here's something that I never hear about, and maybe you've spoken about it before, but what do you remember about Trout Mask coming out? What was the response on the ground at that time when it's in the record stores? Did you get any feedback from that? Were there coverage?
Good question, but we were so cordoned off, controlled in that house that what record store? Did I go to one in 3 years? Maybe. All I heard was the feedback around that we got from Frank. Various bands of the Mothers were very complimentary of that. Buzz and Bunk Gardner, the horn players, these guys were jazz cats, right? I mean, they were players. And I knew it immediately. It was just like, oh, these guys can really play. We're doing this thing. Cool. A lot of hard work. All of that. We're listening to some very creative things. Very gestalt thing for us. But hitting the ground and the effect of it was like my parents going, what are you doing down there? And then the neighbors go, oh, geez, you're kind of famous, but what is it that you do? So watching people try to justify it that are, work at the post office or whatever, you know what I mean? So they're not used to this. And I'm so focused in it. It was such a hothouse environment. I didn't even understand any of those other people anymore. It was like, this is the best thing there is. This is what we do. And very quickly after that, I went, okay, wait a minute. I got to see it in a different perspective. But I was pretty much isolated from much of the views other than Rolling Stone. When we get interviews from Langdon Winter or whoever came to the house to do that stuff,
Oh, they did come to the house to interview people?
Don. Yeah, not us.
Lester Bangs?
Lester Bangs, yes. And Langdon Winter, both of them. So yeah, there was that stuff, the LA Weekly or little magazines and things like that. So there was probably a few other things, but it was a lot of it was filtered through Frank, I think.
Well, because it's originally released on Frank's label.
Right, straight, yeah. And then, which was owned by Warner Brothers Reprise, right? So I can't remember when it went. I think it was Reprise that it finally went out.
Ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very interesting because, we now view it, rightly so, as one of the great masterpieces of music. I don't even know that I feel comfortable calling it a rock music album.
Not at all. It's throwing a label on it isn't fair, other than a new perspective and he was really smart in keeping us from being very much a part of it. How he did it is well documented, that he was really not very functional as a human being. And I really do still think that in these days he would have been diagnosed with some issue. But he was brilliant and extremely creative and really stayed in that mindset. That's where he lived. That's where the guy, I'd never seen him run in his life, right? So he didn't have a physical presence at all other than his big boisterous voice. But this is an indoor dude. And so that creativity was amazing. I mean, I learned a lot through adversity and distress. But in hindsight, you just wipe all that away and you go, wow, man, I learned a lot of shit in there. So, yeah, it's an art project.
Well, music is an art form.
Yeah, yeah. But when you put lyrics with it and you challenge those boundaries, it was almost like some kind of carnival that came down from Mars or something. It had such a different place. And I don't want to put it out there really because it is a human experience and it has all those things, because all the lyric references and those things are all about humanity and stuff. So it is a very human thing, but it was just obviously so different and so highly conceptualized by how it happened.
Well, I always point out to my students and anybody that will listen really that the lyric writing is just of another level.
Yeah.
The use of language. I mean, we're talking about 1969 and certainly leading up to that. So some of the most personal, some of the most clever and fun and just really detailed, kind of chiseled out lyrics in a rock band, as it would have been known maybe at the time.
Right.
And that, I think, is one of the things that puts it into another place in terms of artistic achievement is the lyric writing.
I totally agree.
And then hijinks. That's something that I always like to talk about. The kind of bits, the things that exist on it of.
Okay, yeah, the one-offs that happened that were just things that happened, right?
Yeah, like was that from Zappa coming in and just trying to capture things that he did with his own band he had done?
No, I mean, actually, the one that was Artie and Roy Estrada, which both ended up in the band, so they played on Trout Mask on the blimp. It was something that Don called Frank in the studio and wanted Jeff Cotton to read his poem, because he would be laying in bed, just pointing fingers at controlling the world from his bed. He was in bed when that happened.
He was in bed.
Oh yeah, he was in bed all the time. That's a different story. Anyway, so Jeff called. Frank was in the studio. Says, "Wait, put on the microphone." That's Frank being smart. And I don't know if this was a recording of them or if they were rehearsing. I don't know if, you know what I mean? It was one or the other. I think it might have been a recording that he was listening back to or something, and then he just went, wait, let's do this. And that's how that happened. The Doug Moon stuff where he'd show up and play blues guitar, Doug just came down and visited, an ex-Beefheart member. So that was China Pig. And Doug was good at that kind of stuff, the finger style. It was a little too country or red state for me. I'm getting political, but anyway. So all of those things were just things that just happened. And then, of course, the recordings that were Hair Pie Bake 1, and I can't remember what other tune right now. I can't remember what we did. Human Gets Me Blues, maybe. Were recorded at the house. And that's how Frank wanted to record it, to keep that, like, what are those strange people doing in this house? It was a little condescending from that point of view, but I think he realized that it was strange enough to maybe that would add character to it. Those things. And then I was glad that we went to the studio because it made the rest of the 21 pieces, I think, or something like that. Out of the 28 were done in the studio. Oh,
yeah. There's this incredible I call it a program where, you're changing locations.
Mm-hmm.
The sound of some of the production changes, the locations of where the recordings are made changes. You can picture Don out in the field singing Orange Claw Hammer.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's one of the first, for me, one of the first sort of filmic, visual style recordings.
Yeah, definitely. I just got a contact, a guitar player that's played with a bunch of people, and he wanted to take lessons. He's been shy about it, but who was best friends with the kid that walked up on, and when he says, well, what do you think? Oh, it's nice.
Yeah, right.
He's since passed away, I guess, from Parkinson's, but
oh, wow.
I mean, that's, again, they're old people now. They were little teenagers, right? Little 12, 13-year-olds. That was an odd one. That just happened this month. So, but anyway, yeah, that was it. And I was just remembering Veterans Day Poppy with Gary Marker on bass, who was from Taj Mahal. And there was maybe 2 tunes. Yeah, Moonlight on Vermont and Veterans Day Poppy. Or is that the same? That's not the same song, is it? No. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I was going to run in it together. 71, So yeah, that was another area because that was recorded before Mark was in the band, right? So those tunes were lifted. And yeah, that was when we were going to re-record Strictly Personal.
Oh, you're supposed to re-record Strictly Personal.
Yeah, I was learning all those songs. We were going to re-record it. And then while we did those first 2, the album came out and showed up at the house. I was a little upset because it was like, oh man, I like this music. I want to do it, And it's like, okay, we're over with that.
There's a interesting story that I haven't heard you tell a lot, but last time maybe we spoke about this is the experience, the process of, the now famous process of Don playing on the piano, it being recorded, and then you having to excise and culled from that One Red Rose That I Mean? Is that the piece that you mentioned to me?
Can I just jump on and kind of line that up? Okay.
Please.
Trout Mask was John dealing with the reel-to-reel recordings of Don playing. So how that happened, I saw it happening. I didn't pay attention. I was in the little washroom trying to practice all this stuff. And John would notate, or however he would go through the parts, and however he dealt with Don lining them up and stuff and saying, okay, that's this part and whatever. That still happened. One Red Rose and Peon were both things that happened on Decals, not Trout Mask. And that's when John was gone, and now this is my job, and the cassette recorder had been invented by then. Again, I'm aging myself, telephone booths and cassettes. But so on those pieces, especially those two, obviously white keys, right? And the rest of the album, black keys. So Big Dummy and all those things are in E flat minor, right? So we get the pentatonic scale, you know what I mean? So white keys, black keys, and he found those and separated those. On both of those pieces, I actually restrung how they went. I did not stay with the order of what he did, and I left parts out that were just ridiculous. I don't know, it's hard for me to remember, honestly, so I don't want to say that I knew he wouldn't know. I just did what I thought it deserved, went and played it for him, and he called Jan out and said, look what I've done. And obviously he didn't even know that I had reordered and put things together, edited and did those things on both of those pieces. And so Mark and I were living together at the time, so I arranged the bass part and then we worked on that together and played it. So it was like, I guess it feels like more of a big risk now that I think about it. Then I was just going, no, just do this. There it is. And I knew I was breaking the honesty rule, but when he reacted like that, that changed everything for me.
So it was a sort of confirmation that you had done it well.
Or that he really didn't. He knew the overview of how to keep this in an artistic way, keep us from playing our corny blues licks, all of that control, where I'd show him, and I even did this in the interview I did with Samuel Andreev, talked about it. It was just like, he says, show me how you're playing that blues thing. Then he'd play it, and then he'd teach me the part. And it was like, it was worse than what I was playing, but it was the same thing. But it was a control issue to keep us from playing pedestrian things. And I really think it was smart. I really do. We would have played we were kids, you know? And he was a very special artistic person, a complete jerk, but very special. And so I think that was a smart thing. It could have been done in a better way by saying, I want to do this because, you know.
So presumably you were taking ideas or cells or motifs from these recordings, and you could move them in register?
Yeah. I just rearranged the chunks. There was chunks that were nice. They were just what they were. Da, 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 da. I can't remember the piece at all. I try to stay away from it. But in that, okay, there's number one. Okay, no. It jumped too far. It went too far. There was no progression to it. That's what I felt like. And so I just went, okay, that one's just not even going to be in there. Okay, so this was what he played at the first. Good, nice starting point. And then I just started sticking, flipping end on end. All the things that were there. I didn't write anything. I didn't change notes on the parts. I changed the order of them, threw things out, and moved them around. Right.
Well, and presumably also to get keyboard parts to fit on the guitar, that's quite a challenge.
Yes, it really was. Now, in the two pieces there, I think those things were, again, I don't know if the keyboard's in the screen here, but yeah. He was playing really close and not so close, you know, that you're playing half steps and unplayable things on the guitar. So it transcribed pretty easy on those pieces, not on the other ones. It was just like, you can't lean on it and expect me to play that. So we edited, but on Trout Mask, that process happened with John, and John had a really good ownership of the parts. It was pretty amazing. He knew the parts.
Well, I mean, I think it bears saying, and I don't mind saying this, entering this into the record, but I think that there should be a Zoot Horn Rollo arrangement credit for Decals.
Yes. And I was supposed to get, I sent this in, somebody wrote a poem. It was Billy Harkleroad's Peon. And then he says, I noticed that Don wrote it, so I can't have that, can't write that as a poem. And then I said, well, here's the answer. Officially, yes, he did. Not quibbling, but I arranged it. And through the time, like Crazy Little Thing, Low Yo-Yo, those are all things I was doing. Clear Spot, during that period especially. Those basic gels or cells, I'll call them, or what, as you call it, these basic chunks of ideas were the starts of those tunes. And then he would mess with it. And then I would go, can we do this? And he'd go, yeah. So he was allowing me to do more. And so he says, yes, you're going to get just a general percentage of writer's credit. That never happened.
Here's something I'd love to clear up just a little bit more. We happen to know, and you've also reiterated this, that he was an excellent whistler,
mm-hmm.
and he was a really extraordinary singer and vocalist in terms of not just the Beefheart voice, but other types of singing.
I've said this about his singing, and yes, he could whistle bebop. I'll never forget him blowing smoke circles. We all smoke cigarettes, and he'd do these smoke circles, and he'd whistle bebop through the circle. I mean, it was unbelievable, like a magic trick, circus act. Really unbelievable. When he was relaxed and he was on, he was amazing. That's why I'll say this. I don't think he was ever recorded how well he could really sing, ever. Maybe early on before I was in the group. And he could have used his imitations of people were just so dead on. Bob Dorough. I mean, what? That thin little voice, you know what I mean? Who was the guy that did word jazz?
Ken Nordine.
Yeah. And then Teresa Brewer, where he'd do that little hiccup thing in his voice, or whatever. And he could do that shit. And when he was relaxed, sitting there with a cigarette, he could sing his ass off. So controlled and so dynamic. And he was so uptight when he sang everything in the studio. It was very disappointing. I mean, so I hear it as less than it could have been, only because of how talented he was and how sharp he would sing and when he needed to be in tune. Trout Mask, no. Decals, maybe sometimes on certain things, and he did. He was fine with those things. But by the time of Clear Spot, it was like, you need to, these are simple things. This is a little R&B thing. You need to be in tune, dude. And he could do it, but he just couldn't, because when his energy level went up, he got tight, and everybody has a problem, and so that's where that mental dysfunction starts showing up.
But in a rehearsal setting or in a relaxed setting at the home, to what degree is the whistling or the singing of musical ideas imparted to the band?
Whistling was. Singing things too, yeah, and graphic ideas, just descriptions, all of those things. He'd whistle a part, and he could retain that. He'd whistle away, and the descending part in Lick My Decals, right? I was thinking of descending, but it's actually ascending. He whistled that. Okay. But I don't remember really specifically. I just remembered there was a lot of parts in whistling, and even in the Trout Mask tunes, he'd come running out of the bedroom in his robe and go, no, do this, because he could hear what we were doing, and would sculpt things after the fact. Brilliant, actually. I think that's a really, really would be a great organic way to deal with players. I mean, with your chops and the jazz background or creative music background, where you're playing with really great players, that stuff almost just happens instinctually because of their level of musicianship. We weren't those guys. But I think there's something about a naive player that when you do it in that sculpting thing, to change it in a rehearsal where bands make sounds rather than hired guns, And I even think that in the jazz world, I really liked a lot of the bands that were bands, It's just there was something cohesive that would happen with a group of people that stayed together for a while and toured.
It is. It's a kind of group mindset develops. You know each other. You're comfortable. I mean, the relaxation that comes with trusting. Yeah. You can relax. You can trust that somebody is going to follow your idea.
Right.
So in a certain degree, you have Beefheart really kind of editing what you guys are doing in real time.
Right. Yeah. Which I think is really good, because this is his overall creation. Did he know the exact parts? Hell no. But so what? The only problem is claiming that you do. Okay? That's the only problem. So doing that in that way, I had no problem with the idea of that he did this. He was very much in control of the overview of this. But, you know, it would be nice if when you're dealing with human beings, it's not AI, it's human beings. You should be a little nicer about it.
Did you enjoy playing live with that group?
Well, that's a big subject. The reason I've been away from that is that was never really my comfort zone. Playing with people was. In front of people usually wasn't the case. Often it's happened. It happened a lot, but not compared. 80% of the time it was not. 20% of the time there was magic, or you know what I mean, percentage-wise. But because of him being so dysfunctional and blaming everybody on the planet for everything he did wrong because he couldn't remember his lyrics, couldn't hear himself, and then we're hearing only his voice through the monitors on the stage, and I'm trying like hell to hear John, you know. That dysfunction made live gigs just awful, and there was always a culprit after the gig. You fucked it up, and you're, you know, so no, there was moments. And when he was on and he was accepting what was happening on the stage, those were probably the moments that were really fun. So I remember a few gigs. Definitely Albert Hall was one.
Do you remember these photo shoots? So tell me a little bit about this, because I find this fascinating that this went on. Where did it go on? Was there discussion?
That's right out. That's at the Trout Mask house, right out the back door. That little bridge and all that stuff was still there. I don't think the bridge is still there. I'm not sure, but there was. I'm gonna guess 3/4 of an acre of property, maybe, or something like that. It was a big space with this tiny house on it, and that was in the yard. I don't remember who took the photos. I'm pretty sure it was somebody probably connected to Zappa. One of Frank's people. Frank had people, but you know. That's all I remember, and it was all very staged. We put on our gear, you know, and you know, no jeans and t-shirts, right? And
was that part of the group concept too? Was kind of on-stage persona and a look for the members?
Oh yeah.
How did that go down?
Same way as the music, very much controlled.
So these outfits that you guys are wearing, he had comments about what you should and shouldn't wear.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Interesting.
Yep.
Wow. So how did it end?
How did my Beefheart life end?
Yeah.
The last album, I just heard an interview, Art did another interview online, and he was more complimentary of the music than I felt. It was like we were all knowing the music was dumbing down gradually. It was kind of a downhill tumble for Trout Mask that way, as far as the artistic quality of the music. I didn't like that album at all. Again, 3 or 4 of the tunes I should have gotten some writing credit for the music.
Which ones?
Well, I can't remember. I don't even know the songs. I don't even know. I'm out of there. But in that process, and we were getting ready for a tour, and it was just like, okay, I was just blown away that after all this time and all of this, and now you bring a guitar player in to do these solos. Really? You know, I can do that better than what's going on there. Why is this person there? He had given up all the control to the DiMartino brothers.
Right.
You know, and so it was like, okay, shitty music, no credit. We're going on tour. We're going to get our per diem, and we'll come home broke, just like before. If the music sucks, and we're going to go out there and play to fans that are going to be pissed off, and I'm not going to get paid, fuck it, I'm not doing this. I'm out of there. So I went right from my hotel room and walked right over to Hardy's, because we were just done finishing up the thing. I said, I'm done, Art. And he said, wow, you know, I agree. And then Mark, very soon we told Mark, you know, like, hey. And he goes, yeah, we're out of here. This is stupid. We're not going to get paid. You know, it's the same old thing in the music. I mean, you suffer for art, okay, but suffering for crap?
How quickly?
74, 75, something like that, I think.
Yeah. And then Mallard happens. How quickly?
Greg, you're you're asking a 71-year-old man that has memory issues. I'm going to say.
Then let me couch it this way.
Okay.
Was there excitement or energy of leaving to start something new with these guys that you'd been playing with?
I get you. Okay. No, not at first for me. It was, what am I going to do with my life? This has been so controlling and so powerfully good and bad at the same time. No middle ground. Now I have to go, okay, I'm 26, I guess. And I'm going 25, 26, and I'm going, what am I doing? What am I going to do? So I was freaked out. I had gotten out of Vietnam. That was the good part. And so Mark was still wanted to be, Mark always, everybody else in the band really liked performing and doing that, being in front of an audience. That was really important to all three of those guys. And I've heard that mentioned in their interviews that Samuel did. But I was not that guy so much, you know, it was about the music. I was the guy that tuned everybody's instrument and made sure you guys set yourself on fire and I'll just hide back here and we'll play. So I wasn't happy to get into it. Mark stayed in touch, made the connection with Ian Anderson because of our opening act tour that we did with them. And they were really, really cool, gracious people. And so he got that. And then so the call came to me, well, let's come down to Hollywood. I'm playing a gig. He was playing a gig at the, what's the basketball arena? They did 3 shows in a row. It was, I can't remember where the Lakers played. I mean, a huge Forum, yeah. Three nights in a row, filling the Forum. Major gigs. And then I went out to dinner with him and he said, just Ian and I, and he said, this should happen. You know, you guys could stay together and this could be a thing that would work. And so that put me over the top. And then I talked to Mark again. It was Mark's impetus. I was burnt out on it. And then we did that, you know, with various members. We tried to get John involved, did some of his tunes. Art did the first record, was going, okay, no money again, really, you know, but at least we don't have the overlord. But then after that, I was doing all the work. And Mark has a different recollection of this, and that's the nicest way I can say it, but he's actually wrong. He said, I broke up the band and went to Virgin Records. I didn't. I went to him and I said, I'm done. I'm working on music and there's too much country influence for me. You're not practicing. People aren't practicing. It's like, I want to move forward. I want to get better at what I'm doing, and we're going to end up in the same place again. This is not that much fun for me anyway, so I have to really like the music, and I just didn't like being the businessman, the guy that stayed and did all of that afterwards. So it burned me out again when I was already burned out. And therefore I went to Oregon and played classic guitar for 6 years. So
do you meet your lovely wife, Charlotte, when you get to the Northwest?
Yeah, but way after that. When did I meet? Well, we've been together, or a week ago was our 26th wedding anniversary, so we've been together 29 years. So I was in Eugene about 5-6 years before that. So she was going to school. She's German and she put herself through school here. And I was kind of going back and forth from the coast, between LA and the coast. I was with a different woman at that time. She was a school teacher. And then that stopped, and then I was like, okay, what do I do? And then I became kind of a drug mess. I didn't know what to do with myself. And so to clean up and get myself together, I moved from the coastal area to Eugene, got a job, had my only real job in my life, or that type of job, right? And then just started playing locally and teaching, but studying. I really wanted to study.
It's
so
really
I was 26, about 27, 26, 27 is when I really started to study. It was like, okay, got the Slinimsky book and went, okay, wow. Not that I learned much, but you know.
Our 26th wedding anniversary is next week.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we had done that around the same time.
Well, yeah, but you were a lot younger.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So let's skip forward to our meeting. Obviously, had been a Beefheart fan for a really long time. I think I was kind of late to the game, so everything I was listening to in terms of Beefheart in the early 80s was not contemporaneous. And then I think the final Beefheart record came out, Ice Cream for Crow, and so I was around for that. But I mean, I was already off in avant jazz land and contemporary classical land. So my take on the Beefheart thing was a little bit different than if I had experienced it contemporaneously, because I could hear all the other elements, the Frank elements, the Ornette elements, the polytonal, polyrhythmic elements. I mean, it struck me really hard, and I appreciated it maybe more than I could have if I had heard it when I was developing. So when it was time that I was doing a lot of my bands were coming out of LA. So I was working with Nels and Alex Cline in my group Interzone, and then I also had started my piano trio Pianissimo, which was really a Boston group. But then when I would go to LA, I would always work with the wonderful Dave Witham on piano and different bass players. I think Joel Hamilton would have been in the band when we did a West Coast tour.
Is that when I saw you?
Yeah, and I knew we were going to play in Eugene, and I had heard tell that the guitar player from Captain Beefheart, Zoot Horn Rollo, was a guitar teacher in Eugene. So I said to the club owner or the booker, I said, can you invite Zoot Horn Rollo to our show? And he said, yeah, I know him. I'll invite him. And you may remember the guy. I don't remember his name.
I don't either, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And you didn't just come to the gig, you came to our sound check. So it enabled us to really just finish the sound check, sit down with you, and right away I just felt like this simpatico. And I was really surprised when I said to you, why haven't you done a solo album? And your response was, well, if I did a solo album, would you play on it? And that was one of those things where when it happens, it happens. I remember that you were cool with what the piano trio I had was doing. So you kind of,
I loved it.
Yeah, and we had a Beefheart tribute in there. I mean, although it's very abstracted, but I have this piece, Hysteresis, which is dedicated to Don, and we played that. And so you were clearly this guy who was up for whatever. You didn't mind if we played a ballad or if we played something from Cecil Taylor. So that's when I thought, okay, so he really is that kind of musician. So, very often you'll hear musicians on very radical stuff, and then by the time you meet them, they're disowning it, and they're saying, well, now what I'm really just only into Palestrina now. So
right.
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
You meet your heroes. That wasn't the case. So I said yes to your idea, and within a year, you had 14 tunes written.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to do a record.
And this is we met around 98, and we recorded in 2000.
99, 2000, I thought.
Something like that, right?
99, 2000, right around there.
And, I guess I should tell people a little bit of my take on it, but I'm certainly want to be cross-checked with you, and I want to hear your take on this. But I remember you sent me for this, well, we should probably say this. It's this record. We Saw Bozo Under the Sea with Bill and Baby Bill.
Yeah.
Um, I love this picture as well.
The non-chord.
Yes.
I was trying to make fun of all those people that do that or paint extra fingers on it. But anyway.
It was a good joke for those of us that know guitar, yeah.
Right. I want to talk about your trio, but keep going.
Oh, just to say that I remember you said you were going to do it, and you never know if somebody's going to do what they say.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I mean, I knew you were busy as a teacher. You had a following, as you still do, as a music instructor, not just really a guitarist, but really a musical, conceptual instructor. And then I got a cassette in the mail.
A cassette? Is that what I
said?
said?
Was it a cassette? I think it was a cassette. It might have been a CDR.
I think it was a CDR.
Okay, good. CDR. I still have it here somewhere.
Oh, really?
And it was MIDI versions of all these tunes.
I had MIDI'd up everything, yeah.
And now you remind me on this. Did I say these tunes would sound cool with vibes doubling some of the melodies, or did you request that I add vibes?
I think you probably suggested that. I don't remember, honestly. I think it was a discussion that came up, and I of course, as soon as I found out that you played vibes, which we hadn't had that discussion until we were in this project, or the idea of starting it, and I didn't know that. And so I don't remember how that came about, but it was like, well, that's going to happen. And I do remember the 442 tuning, which ended up on John's eyes as one of the cool parts that I played with a little bit with that, because I was at 440, and it almost had the tragic thing, because it was a tragic situation in my life, that person, because all of those tunes are portraits of people.
And we should say that that's not John French that it's about.
No, not at all. I can talk about any of those things, but can I go back just a second? Because what you were saying, and it's cool to remind me of this. You had written a letter on legal paper, and somehow that got to me, and I think I brought it to the gig, your gig, and it was a letter, and I'd gotten things before, and I'm going, rolling my eyes as I'm reading it. Well, I'm this progressive. This is what I'm into, and blah blah blah, and then you just did this thing with Pat Metheny, and I went, what? We flipped back, and Derek Bailey and that stuff, right? When you did the is it Wertko? Or how do you say his name? Wertko?
Wertko, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it was that quartet of people, right? And it was like, okay, it was like, okay, this guy's the real shit. And so I'm going, I want to go see this trio, and I loved it. I remember talking to the piano player, I can't remember his name, and I was talking about books, because I was just trying to study. You guys were so much better than me from a technical standpoint. I mean, because you had all studied. I mean, it was obvious. So I was out of my league. He said, you want to sit in? I'm going, I'm fine sitting here listening. When I control my environment that I'm playing in, I feel okay. But as a across-the-board musician that you throw up a piece of music, I'm not going to be good at that. You don't need me failing. So I was really blown away at the sound, and also that letter. So then when I thought, if I have access to somebody that can play like that wants to do this, awesome. And that was a great inspiration for me. And I will say this is your podcast thing here, but man, and I've said this in quite a few interviews, you set the table so well, because it was MIDI, because I couldn't afford people being around flying and doing all of that, to have this very thickly layered piece of music stuff. You set the table so well. That's what made it organic in any way, besides me leaving my sloppy parts in there, was how you set the table and were sensitive to the different tunes. I actually sent a copy of that to a drummer named Morgan Agren in Sweden. Somebody had connected me through Zappa, and he, very good player from a different place though. I'm playing from, you're not going to play much here, dude. I hope you like playing like that, And anyway, it was like, not going to happen there. And then we started talking. I think, did you do a sample thing or something to send back, or did you just do it? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because now you're freaking me out a little bit. I don't remember the letter.
Yeah, it was a 2 or 3 legal size pages of the letter, and that's why I showed up at the gig. It was like, okay, this guy's the real shit. It's just like I've had people camping that I've had to call police, camping in my front yard that are from Japan, and they're a baker and they've got this weird gear on, and it's like, I'm sorry for whatever's causing those issues, but you're scaring the shit out of me, thinking I'm supposed to give you time because you flew here. So sometimes I don't know who I'm dealing with, right? Especially with the ones that go, well, Trout Mask, and they're wearing a trout mask or whatever, it's like, so there's been some unusual people and music people that come from whatever they think their idea is, but they don't really have the chops or the musicianship to do that. So when I read that letter, it went, okay, I'm going to go listen. Then within 10 seconds, I'm going, holy shit, these guys are really good. This is awesome. I was sitting right here listening to wonderful music, and I hadn't heard any good music in a long time. And so that really, and I was just starting to gear up again. It was like I was just kind of really practice, man. I got to go again, So.
Well, I'm happy to hear that I understood then, as I understand now, that it's important to be sincere in your communications with the people that you love and admire. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I had done with other heroes of mine. So big props to old Gregg, or young Gregg.
Well, big time, because the cool quote on that record where I had to say, and I have to thank people, and thanks for Elias waiting to become, come out into the air, that Gregg could do the session just before Elias was born.
My wife was very pregnant and in fact having complications. So that was a really stressful time.
Yeah.
I think I did it in 3 sessions. It would have probably been 2 drum set sessions and then 1 vibe session.
Vibe session.
I didn't play vibes on every piece, but then it was about 4 or 5. So I wanted those to be separate sessions, and it helped me to get my head around things a little bit more. But I have to say, and I've said this to you before, but I don't mind saying it now, which is, what a nice variety of music on that album. Your writing, you're not a repeat offender. So, I like to say that you really brought the variety. And so that record is a great collection of different approaches, different kinds of styles, some ballads, some slow things, some faster things, some very aggressive things. There might be 1 or 2 Beefheart moments on it. And I can tell you, when that came out, I was very excited, but I knew, and it bore out, Beefheart fans didn't cotton to it in a way, because it didn't have all these Beefheart references that they had been expecting. Mm-hmm. And I know that at that time I said to you, screw that. I mean, there's no, you did the Beefheart thing. There's no reason for you to try to do something like that. And you had already then, subsumed so many influences and other musical information, all the different harmonic ideas, some very advanced harmonic and modal stuff on that record, all the different guitar sounds, which is another cool thing about that record. And then I have to say, man, I just love slide. So having, to play, being able to play, to me, one of the great slide players, maybe even undersung in terms of the great slide players, but love the slide playing on Bozo.
Well, thank you. This, it's right here. This, just a slide story, okay? We were Beefheart recording, and Little Feat, Lowell George, at the time they were in one of these small mixing rooms, same size as this room, and they were mixing Willin', that song, okay? One of his biggest hits, probably, made more money before he died. I had dropped my slide. It was a glass slide, and I had learned to do those from Ry Cooder, right? And you'd cut these cognac bottles with this hacksaw and stuff, right? Because they had ridges on them. And I said, I dropped a slide. Lowell, do you have a slide? And he handed me this spark plug socket. And he says,
That's what that is.
Yeah, I got this from Lowell in 1971. Or 70 or 71, something like that. And it's been that forever. You know, so it's a little too smooth. You know, if I was so dedicated to slide all the time, I'd be working on different textures, you know, things like that. But it's always just been violin in V, and especially in later years where I'm not doing it in tunings, which Bozo was that. I don't know that I was in a tuning for any of it. I don't think so. It's just standard tuning. So it was more about melodic, using this as a way to phrase with guitar rather than playing slide guitar. You know what I mean? It was like, no, it was another voice. And I have huge violin envy. So I've even gone down the road of putting this thing on. And this is back when I was in my time of staring software in the face, you know, Logic and stuff. And I would pull up, I think it was Arthur Grumio, is however you say his name. Anyway, they were these Bach pieces and solo violin. And I just ran it into an analyzer to see what was going on with the notes. And his notes had so much information in it. And this thing had almost no information. So I was starting to try to figure out how to, with distortions at different pitches, different delays, different things, to recreate all that extra information on the notes. At some point, I want to redo that again. Get back in there to really build a tone that gets closer to the rosin of the bow, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for the compliment on the slide.
Well, you know, it's so great because then there's nylon string on the album, there's baritone guitar on the album. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, not a boring album. And I mean that, you know, in the best possible sense, is that each tune, contrast, significant melody, significant rhythmic component, significant harmonic profile. And I always wondered, because I don't know if I was so busy being a new dad, what was the response that you received when the thing came out? Because I know it went out of print pretty fast. It sold.
Well, the printing was me. I mean, went out of print because I had this much money to print up 3,500 CDs because Sony had a plant here in Eugene, which was nice. So, and this is the crazy story. I'm going before it. So you're going down memory lane, so I'm getting things out of a sequence.
Please.
But running into David Mitson, who was at the time where I lived few blocks from here, but he was visiting a friend. He's English. He was in Hollywood. He's the guy that CBS hired to remaster the Robert Johnson stuff and a lot of high profile releases. And he came to my house and he says, I heard your Zoot Horn Rollo. I go, well, yeah, come on in. And he goes, and I said, yeah, I just finished up this project. And he goes, do you want me to master it? And he goes, this is what I've done. And I go, well, yeah, but how much money? And he said, give me 2 bitchin' bottles of wine. And I went out and spent $450 on wine and gave him 2 bottles. And he was so happy. He's back in England now, but that really helped also. That we mastered because it was a weird way to do it with the MIDI thing, but we had mastered on 1/4-inch tape, on tape, sent him tape, and he was so happy about that. And so for the time that was recorded, it came out as a pretty good recording in the odd way that it was done. I mean, what's the studio?
Oh, at Tedesco and Paramus.
Yeah. Who, again, somebody's emailed me and was at those sessions. He was one of the coffee tea boys or whatever, you know, one of the people working for your buddy that had the studio. Anyway, coming out of the woodwork. So I kind of lost where I was going. I was talking about David Mitson as just this lucky thing that happened in the process. But you got to get me back on track again.
And so what was the response when Bozo?
Oh, the response, right.
This is 20 years ago now.
Yeah, I know. So I'm trying to think, isn't this at the same time as the internet? You know?
Well, see, this is the thing, too. If you look at what's going on at that time, yeah, it's internet. It's certainly not streaming services or anything like that.
No. I mean, I remember I would watch a video and then I'd watch it pixelate, and it would take 2 or 3 minutes with dial-up to get, oh, there he is. There's that guy. You know, so it was just a beginning thing. I sold all of those records, and I actually made some money. Not a lot. I spent too much money on things I didn't need to spend. I didn't know what I was doing. So I'm throwing out 25 grand on this thing here. And, but eventually it paid for itself and I made some money on it. Now, the thing I did afterwards when I stopped halfway, the mask things, that's when music became free and really was different. So I was going to the post office every day. So I was, and I'm trying to, I guess it was letter mail. I think I talked people into, oh, I did. That's right. Okay. Remembering. Guitar Player Magazine did it 2 times, did articles in there. Joe Gore, I believe. An interesting player. And Rolling Stone, David Fricke, again, Downbeat. So I was working, because I was working at a music store at the time, I had kind of an in to different distributors and things, and to get interviews and things. So that helped move it, and the response was good. I'm sure there was, once it got online and they're going, oh God, he's not Alan Holdsworth. Well, damn right I'm not. I never said I was. But I think it turned into a positive response. There might have been negative things, but I wasn't in communication with those people. I was just getting letters in the mail with a $15 check, and I'd go to the post office and mail them.
I remember those days quite well. My taxes included all the postage back in the day. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden there was email and there was no more postage, and people who haven't spent that money don't know what we're talking about, but it was a lot of money to spend.
Yeah, I borrowed from a friend, paid him back, with interest, and he was very generous, and he's done that twice in my life. But it was like I didn't know what I was doing. I went out and bought a bunch of mics. I thought I was going to be recording it all. So I have a really nice set of mics that basically have never been used.
Oh, really?
Well, I've got some guitar mics that's, some nice condenser mics and some, 414s and things like that I've used over the years for sure. But I was saying I paid $800 for a barcode. I didn't need that. I didn't know that. I didn't know. I was just going to do it the best I could. That was it. That was it. It was just, I'm doing this, and I wasn't really thinking I've never customized tunes for an audience. I've never done that. I just do the best I can at what I'm doing at the time. And if I'm happy with it at the time, which I'm never happy in hindsight because you grow, right? But I was just trying to do the best I could with how to be able to do it at that time, and having access to you. And then the other players that I brought in, Mark Snyder and Dave Lucas on bass. Mark did the whole last thing I did with him. Very wonderful person, great player. So that would, learning curve. As far as the sounds and the individual things of the tunes, they were all portraits of people. Still living with Mom is obvious. She was still alive. Elvis Beans, me. Dancing with a Doorknob was my sister. I can't remember them right now, but John's Eyes was a friend of mine that was dying of cancer. And very powerful moment in my life. His eyes were black. He had a heart attack, and he was in a bubble because he had leukemia. He was a physicist that worked at a Hanford nuclear plant, and of course he died of leukemia. Mm-hmm. But he had a heart attack, and they hung him upside down, so his eyes were black, completely black. And I'm laying in bed with this guy talking about his children and stuff, and he's dying. Powerful moment, and I'm just looking at black eyes. So I had to write a song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don's Secret.
Obviously who that is. Don's Secret was his poodle puppy, and I can't remember, Lulu, I think. That was his secret. And therefore the bluesy, over the top bluesy fatness of the tune, right?
And of course Detective Charlo.
Well, yeah, we know who she is. My wife, yes.
I guess I had never really thought of it that they were kind of portraits, but it makes sense. I always think of them as each tune having its own personality and its own world. Cowboy Coffee. Yeah. Miniature Mojo.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those two were more movies of. Cowboy Coffee was a Zen Buddhist cowboy. okay? Sitting there with that, the cartoon stream of smoke at the campfire as it's setting, and you can see the thumbnail moon, and he's by himself with his coffee, with the grinds in it, cowboy coffee, right? Contemplating, and that's kind of where I wanted to put opposites together, a cowboy as this Buddhist Zen setting,
Yeah, and I remember you telling me about sort of a miniature altar for a miniature mojo.
Oh yeah. Well, where you stick the pins in and all of that, The voodoo, but a cartoonish version of voodoo, right? Yeah.
So much great stuff, Bill, and I have to say, it's a pleasure to have played on that, and it's the most, if not, it's one of the most commented upon performances that I've given. So I have
that surprises me. That surprises me. I mean, 'cause, dude, you got a nice backlog of stuff. Although I don't know that your modern music is out there for people. The string stuff, the classical stuff.
Well, we're working on that now.
Good.
Yeah, I'm trying.
That stuff should be heard.
Thank you. I'm working on getting more of the chamber stuff out. But it's been interesting because a number of students that come to me for composition lessons are guitarists. And these are guitarists that are Beefheart fans and that know your work, and they know the Bozo record that we did. And I just say, I think that's fine. I love that, that I, in some way, really connected with you in a very meaningful way. And we have a project that we did together. We have this album, and you didn't tell me what to play. I think you told me not to play a lot, but one thing you told me that stuck with me on that particular record was you said, it's okay if you play a little sloppy in some spots.
Mm-hmm.
So things were a little more sort of loose and kind of spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do a ton of takes. I don't think you did any editing of takes. You just sort of chose a take, right?
As I remember, I think you sent me all the ones that I think you liked. I don't know if you sent me extra ones because we're doing this on ADAT, right?
Right.
Video cassettes. I remember almost going through the roof when I listened to it. I mean, literally, I was so fucking happy. It was cool. It was, because it's scary. It's like, oh, what's this going to come back like? It's like, wow, I know he's good, but, there's interpretation, all that stuff. And I don't know that you sent me multiple takes of things. Maybe you did. Maybe you did first take, second take, third take, or something like that. And I just listened to the ones and went, I'm done. I don't think I made any choices. It was just what you sent. Like I said, you set the table up. You knew what I was trying to do. I didn't, without any instruction. You went with what the tune had. It was awesome. It made it so easy because now I got to do bass parts and stuff. In hindsight, with both of the two projects I've done, the Masks and this, and it's always in hindsight where you would fix things. I would give more leeway to the bass lines, but I am really I really write bass lines. It's really important to me. And so it sets it, but then I don't give, my mistake has been to not go, okay, now you get the feel, right? We're playing Lydian flat 7 mode over this G7 flat 5 chord, but I don't ever want you to hit the tonic. And this is the thing I heard off of a Brecker tune, where they're playing and he's playing around this chord the whole time, and then finally it comes together after a while. It was like so evasive, but so strong. So I go, I got to do this, but I did it with the bass part. It was like, and he's just around the chord. It was just, okay, this is great. So I would like to have written more freedom into it and be a little less lazy about some details and more ornamentation in the way I wrote. But I wanted, on these last 4, which we've been talking about Bozo, but the last things for me is I wanted it simpler, and it was just like funky guys out in the desert or just standing there just making, or in Africa, because these masks were really, it was about the masks. And so I wanted it really that. I think I could have written more. I got the texture, I got mostly what I wanted, but in hindsight, I think I was lazy in some places that bother me now, But that's what we do. We go back and listen and grow, right?
Yeah, and we're the worst critics of our own stuff. And, I always tell my students, you have to be your own toughest critic and your own biggest fan.
That's it took me 71 years, Greg. I don't give a shit what people think anymore. And it's taken me a whole long time. That was my biggest, and I did an interview recently about that. I can't remember. It was like, what has held you back the most in music? And I said, me. Totally me. And just in life, it's just like a lack of self-esteem can really shut a person down. So I'm pretty sensitive to it when I see it in other people. And I used to think people are arrogant. And if you're just following your path and your passion, you're not arrogant. And that was a hard one for me to learn, and it's only recently. So as I'm working on what I do now, there's never really been a thought of pleasing anybody, but there was always just a fear or an underlying insecurity about things. And now it's just like, oh my God, the players that are out there now, holy crap. It's unbelievable how good everybody is. I understand it. It's moving on, but this, like what we're doing here, there was one guitar book when I was a kid, Mel Bay, right? Mickey Baker. Okay. So learning how people are doing it, how good they are, I just have to stay away from that because their sensibilities. What a 30-year-old guy with I'm thinking of Adam Neely right now, right? With his advanced degrees, knows his stuff, and he's there. But all of the things that are the current things that are part of their vocabulary, or the things that are where they're growing from, I don't even know about. I don't care about what's that Dilla, Jay Dilla, or whatever the drunk beat and all of that stuff. It's got to happen, man. These guys in Brooklyn got to have that, and I'm going. Okay, I'm an old man. Those references, I don't care anymore. I don't have to keep trying to upgrade in that way by going to newness that I can't relate to. I need to keep learning. I need to keep learning from my perspective. I'm a short timer now, man. I want to get as much out of it as I can, but not by trying to become a 30-year-old.
No, and you learned very early on that the value is doing your own thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You couldn't have learned it in a better setting. Coming up, one of my first big gigs and my first major label recording was the Cecil Taylor record on A&M in Fluorescence. And I just know that Cecil was an influence on me in terms of inspiring me to just be myself. And he said a thing that I always remembered that was useful was never be ashamed of your influences. All of those things that form you, all of those things that inspired you.
I like that, yeah.
That's what you want to present, is your synthesis of all those elements that you find interesting. And that's what I did. It's sort of why I didn't become just a composer or just an orchestral percussionist. Is I thought, well, what if I put all these things that I like to do together, I won't be bored. Right. And it's a life's work. Then you have something to do. You always have something to do. Yes, it's good to be aware of what's going on all the time. And I luckily have a 19-year-old son who's immersed in all of the current stuff. And I enjoy everything that's going on very much because quite frankly, now I know that I can't say, oh man, there's nothing happening now. It was all happening back in the 70s.
Oh God, that's so ignorant. Yeah, I know.
I don't want to hear that. I'd never say it.
No.
Because I don't believe it. And literally the spirit of experimentalism that you generated with Beefheart, that I experienced coming up with guys like Cecil and Derek, Ornette, just saying, do your thing. Do your thing.
Right.
And you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And it has really borne out to be true. And I'm glad that I wasn't a clone of, I don't know, name or anyone, but like Max Roach influence. inspiration was very nice to me when I was in Cecil's band. Things like that. Then oh, I should keep doing this. I should keep doing my version of whatever this is,
It's the only thing you can really know. I mean, it becomes guesswork. If you're trying to go out here, it's like, then you're going, well, you're pandering to what you think they think, or to an audience and all of those things, it's, yeah.
And I love that Don quote, somebody's had too much to think.
I like that. I've never heard that. I like that a lot.
I thought you would have known that one. Yeah, that's something to really relate to in many different situations.
Yeah.
And then also just coming out of jazz, what is the benefit of one or two takes? I mean, you don't see these 4, 5, 7 takes of things on these jazz records. It's like there's an alternate take.
Right.
So, there's value to being spontaneous, and of course, just a word about when you're working remotely. So we were working remotely in 2000.
Yeah.
Right. I was working remotely from you. People often ask me how we did. You weren't there, but I heard the tunes. I knew what the tunes meant because, quite frankly, you mentioned the bass parts. The bass parts and the way the tunes are constructed and the way the parts fit together often just tells you everything you need to know about what you need to add to it as a percussionist. It's not really rocket science at that point. You're not reinventing the wheel. The tune has all of its component parts, and then what is your component part that goes with that?
Right, and if there weren't lines where you had to kind of, where we're playing these elaborate, quick unison lines or things, where everybody's on that, there wasn't that. It was more open than that. Yeah. The lines were a bass line, fundamental line, and then that middle part, which was you on vibes and guitars, or however I laid guitars. So the melodic line was the thing. It wasn't all these unison things, and it wasn't overly elaborate in parts. It was dense, but it wasn't, so it was open. It was open for you to be open with it, right? And that's what you did get. So that's why I liked it.
And so structure is also what you don't allow to happen. So going back to even Don telling you guys don't play common blues licks, what you don't let into it pushes you into another area of language, a vocabulary of the music that I think is pretty clear. Unless we're talking about like completely free improv with Derek Bailey, but to be honest, even when I was playing with Derek, I limited what I would do in each piece.
Well, yeah. How does it make it cohesive if you keep doing the same thing every piece? What makes it a piece?
Or trying to do everything all the time.
All the time is just a run-on sentence, when I'm trying to deal with younger players and they're just playing all these notes, more notes than I can play or care to, and they're playing all these notes, and I go, where was the silence? That's half of it, where's that motif that you gave up on? Did you move it in minor thirds, or what did you do with it, or what did you do construction wise with this thing, this nugget? You just keep playing it and leaving it and leaving it and leaving it, and you're not going anywhere. And also in teaching, again, I'm learning, because of that. I would write things so differently now. Interesting. I don't know, not to bring up, oh, poor me, but going through cancer treatment changed me dramatically. Again, because I couldn't play for months. And then when you're just trying to get back, and I couldn't play because the chemo made my hurt my hand. And when I could finally play again, this was funny, man. It was like I could finally had calluses and I could play. I'm going, fuck, dude, you know a lot of stuff. I had forgot all of this stuff. When I'm practicing, I remember what I'm practicing, and I forget that stuff I knew when I was 16. I get so myopic that, and then being away from it, it was probably pretty good, because I'm going, man, that was fun. that was like defying gravity, like the surfboard, you know what I mean? Or some way to hang glide where air is keeping you up. It was like weightlessness, be able to play again. And what I had taken it for granted so much. So I went from working hard to just going gratitude to still be here and to get to play again. So that adversity really helped me. Kind of a strange time in your life to turn 70 and have that happen. But again, so then what did I do? I started studying bebop. What? Because I had learned Parker heads when I was, how old was I? I'll say mid-20s, early 20s, yeah, right after Beefheart. But I didn't understand how to really play it. I didn't go. And when I came back to it, it was like, I don't want to play bebop. I'm not going to play those changes. But the melodic, the chromaticism, and just the vocabulary of that, I'll turn into what I am with it, right? And it was a sore spot for me that really has helped me learn a lot of that stuff, and then more 12-tone stuff now, right? Where combinations of things that make you not repeat the pitch and all that,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. Well, all stuff you've known, but now I'm doing that. It doesn't mean it'll get filtered through Bill.
And it should be no other way. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to hear what you think of these things, not necessarily you sort of regurgitating anything, but that's true of anybody. And yeah, my influences have changed over the years, and I discovered slower music. I discovered a different way of thinking about time. And I don't just mean rhythmic time, I just mean time. I mean, what does 12 minutes feel like? What does 22 minutes feel like,
Yeah. Interesting.
And so we kind of have to continue to grow. Otherwise, we get bored. But certainly, the music is not going to be as interesting. Bill, I could go on and on, but I feel
know.
Like,
we always do, right?
Yeah, we always do. We'll do it again. I know that that this is slightly exhausting for you, but still, I'm so happy to hear from you.
Not at all. I mean, it's always fun to talk to you, and the Bozo stuff. It was interesting. You don't remember the letter, your perspective, because we haven't had that distinct conversation about the whole how Bozo happened. And
it's the first time we really
because we'll talk about music and what's going on now, because it's been such an interesting time for us. For me, with the cancer thing, and now within the last 2 years have been pretty interesting for me. A lot of adversity that has really helped me grow to be a lot more grateful person.
Well, I'm so grateful to be your friend.
Yeah, me too. So
it's on Spotify, so look for it there, and you'll hear everything that we're chatting about here. Bill Harkleroad, Zoot Horn Rollo, you're the best, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, Greg, it was a pleasure. Okay.